Steve Conte is a bit like the Roy Kent of rock and roll. He's here, he's there, he's every effing where, including today's episode of Tinnitist TV. Now, you probably know Steve Conte as the guitarist for the last incarnation of the New York Dolls, but really, that's just one of his many gigs. He also plays with former Hanoi Rocks frontman Michael Monroe and rockabilly legend Robert Gordon, and he spent years creating music for a whole raft of anime titles, including the smash hit Cowboy Bebop. Over the years, he's gigged with everyone from Billy Squier and Peter Wolf to Maceo Parker and Chuck Berry, and he even spent a decade as Paul Simon's vocal stand-in at tour rehearsals. Basically, Steve Conte has been there and done that. Right now, though, he's doing it for himself with his latest solo release, Bronx Cheer. It's an album that's almost as diverse as his entire career. It has old school New York punk rock, Rolling Stones inspired tracks, scrappy nuggets that sound like Paul Westerberg, some psychedelia, some rockabilly, and even some classic Stax-style soul. From his home in, yes, the Bronx, and on his birthday no less, Conte zoomed in to talk about his new album, his many, many gigs, and a whole lot more. Here's how it went. This album is a blast. I love it from front to back. And the title Bronx Cheer to me totally suits the album. But I'm wondering what it means to you and why you chose it.
Let's see. It works on a number of levels to me. I mean, I live in the Bronx, which is just, I don't know, just not a big reason for it, but I thought it's
shout out.
Kind of a shout out. And but the main thing I liked about it was I had the cover chosen already, and I was looking at this cover. It's this kid. For those of you who haven't seen it, let me see. Do I have anything I can show you with it? No, I don't. They haven't been pressed up yet, so the albums. But the cover is a kid, like angry.
And it looks like it could be a Depression era photo almost, because it's got that sepia tone.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Well, it was, I think it was originally just black and white, and we sort of colored it to kind of have a little balance with the gold letters. And so we made it a bit brown. But yeah, it looks like an old thing. It's a bunch of kids protesting on Fifth Avenue. They're actually protesting the election of Donald Trump in 2016. But I love the photo. It just had so much passion and emotion in it. I saw it in New York Magazine, and I thought, man, that would be a killer album cover. How do I get in touch with this guy? And I found the guy. He's a Polish guy who grew up in South America, is living in Sweden.
Okay.
And great photographer, really sweet guy. I talked to a couple other photographers about some other covers that didn't work out, and it was all for the best because this guy was a beautiful guy. He actually gave me a really decent price on the photo, and I said, okay, good. So we're using this cover. Now, what can I call this album? And I was thinking about New York themes because I live in New York, and specifically the Bronx. And that title just came up one day, Bronx Cheer, and I went, oh, that would be a kind of a nice contrast. Here's this angry kid, and it's got cheer in the title. There's nothing cheerful looking about that. But then, so it worked on that level, but also, a Bronx Cheer is a raspberry, right? So I like the fact that he's a protest. I'll show my politics here. I was not a fan of the last president, so I kind of like the fact that he's giving a raspberry to 45.
And it really reflects the whole energy, though, and the attitude of the disc to a very large degree. It's kind of got that sort of in your face energy to it.
Yeah. I again, I'm a Libra. I'm always balancing everything. The dark and the light, the slow and the fast, the ballads and the up tempos, so I kind of went, I think I made a nice balance of all the kind of music that I'm really into. Well, not all the kind of music, but that would be a crazy album.
Well, I want to get to that, but first I want to start with the biggest one of the biggest surprises to me is the diversity on this album. I mean, you've got that trashy New York rock and glam that you kind of people I think expect to hear from you. But then you've got, a lot of just classic rock. You've got some punky stuff. There's indie rock. There's even some like classic Stax Volt soul. I mean, was that
Thank you for noticing.
it's impossible to miss. But was that the
Well,
plan going into this? I mean, did you intentionally want to showcase the diversity that you've got, or were these just the cream of the crop in terms of being the songs that were the best that needed to go on this album?
well, actually, I had so many songs to choose from. That's why I had a co-producer on this album with me, my friend Andrew Hollander. He, the poor guy, sat through 50 songs of mine. I said, we got what, 10 songs, including Gimme Rockaway. That was the 11th, but that was already done. So I sent him 50 demos and I said, let's pick 10, and he was having a hard time picking too, because he liked so many of them. At one point we had 20. We were going to make 2 albums.
Wow.
We're going to make like a more Americana album and a more just like straight ahead rock and roll album. And then in the end, I'm paying for it myself. So I'm like, you know what? I don't have that much money to lay out. I can't make 2 albums at once or a double album. So let's kind of combine the ones the best of both of these that actually hang together. So, and usually when I make a new album, I usually have like a handful of songs, of new songs, and I build the album around those, and then I fill them in because I have so many songs that I've written, years ago, and it could be a song from, before the last album I put out, or it could be a song from 20 years ago, or in this case, that song "Liar Like You," that punky second cut. I mean, that's a thing I used to sing in high school. And so I flesh it out into a real song. But so I had that the handful of new songs. I think what were the new ones? Wildwood Moon. I'm not looking at the titles, so I can't remember. But I can tell you the older ones. Guilty is from 1994.
Huh.
So is Flying.
Huh.
And Recovery Doll was a song that I presented to both New York Dolls and Michael Monroe, and they both passed on it. Lucky for me. So I think Sexy Lies is a newer one. What else? Overnight Smash is also from 1994. But
Wow.
these songs, I never try and write contemporary sounding, because I mean, I'd have to do it on my laptop, and I'd have to use samplers and loops, and I don't do that. I mean, I can, but I prefer real musicians, real instruments, old school, tape machine, which we recorded onto, a Neve console, great microphones, vintage stuff, vintage amps, vintage guitars. And we bumped it into the computer later for technology, but for convenience and affordability,
Yeah.
which you got to do these days. But I'm not going to make a record like Billie Eilish where I make it in my bedroom, the whole thing on a laptop, because I need to play with other musicians. I need to feel, I need the sound, I need to feel air, I need to hear air in the room, I need to feel speakers pushing air, drums pushing air, the stuff we love about, Led Zeppelin records or Stones records, where you can hear, Charlie or John Bonham hit the snare and it's like, you don't hear that in a lot of new stuff. So yeah, that was my criteria was, and of course, picking the best songs. So I think what we picked was 10 of the best songs that hung together.
Did you record more of them? I mean, do you still have enough left over that you picked those 10, you did those 10, and
Yeah,
now we're back to
yeah,
digging through the vaults?
yeah, yeah, yes. The next time it'll be going through the vaults again.
What was happening in 1994 that you were obviously hitting a bunch of home runs with these songs?
I was playing a lot with bands. I had my band, back then, the Crown Jewels, my brother and I, and yeah, Overnight Smash was one that we did demos for with Crown Jewels. Guilty as well. Flying, sort of.
Mhm.
I was starting the guy I co-wrote that song with, Bryn Arns. He's in a band called Flip. You ever hear them on Hollywood Records?
I haven't.
He's from Minneapolis, and he was living in New York, and we were about to start a band. Uh, he wasn't going to join my band. He was in a band called the Rattlin' Bones. I had the Crown Jewels, and we were going to start a new band. And then he moved back to Minneapolis. But we did write a couple of songs before he left, and that was one of them. And so that's from that same era. Trying to think of what else. The Human Animal, the opening track, that's from like 2008. Yeah, so there were.
Do they take much updating, or I mean, is it pretty much as you wrote them, or did you, kind of go, well, maybe I'll tweak this and change that, and I got a better idea here?
Yeah, if there was like always a lyric that bugged me or something, I made sure I fixed that. And that was another thing that my co-producer Andy was good for. I'd bounce off him. I'd say, I'm not into this line. What do you think? And he's like, no, that's fine. I'll be like, Ray, you really think so? Okay, maybe it's just me. And then sometimes he'd go, yeah, that line right there. I'd say, yeah, I know, I felt it too. And then I change it. But other than lyrics, I mean, musically, other than having, a great band playing it, because some of the demos were done with, loops and drum machines and stuff.
Right.
When you play with a band, that informs the way that you're going to play, and ultimately, you can do all the arranging in your mind that you want beforehand, but once you get in the studio and you hear the sound of the drums in the room, and everything can change.
Hmm. It also helps, I mean, that you've just written these songs that are so classic and timeless sounding. They really sort of, ignore all the trends, so you don't have to worry about them. I mean,
Exactly.
for me, I want to talk about Guilty a bit, because that one, to me, it sounds like an old Otis Redding song. In fact, I listened to it and I didn't have the songwriting credits in front of me. And I was midway through the song, I started Googling, going, is this some old Stax Volt song that I haven't heard? Because it's absolutely spot on. It could come from 1967 with Booker T and the MGs playing behind it, and I mean, is that a big influence for you? Is that
Oh yeah.
go to for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I had one of the first 45s I had was Booker T and the MGs, as a matter of fact, and Otis Redding and Sly, and I had all those early. If I didn't own the records yet, I heard them on the radio all the time, and they just got in there. I mean, honestly, I didn't own a lot of records before I got old enough to buy my own. Like my first records were bought for me for my birthday or whatever, and it was like Beatles and Stones and Steppenwolf,
Mm-hmm.
Born to Be Wild. I still have it. I still have all my 45s and all my vinyl. But yeah, that song "Guilty" was. I'm trying to remember why I wrote a song that sounded like that. I mean, it's just something totally natural for me. I mean, I've played songs like "These Arms Are Mine" by Otis, which has that same kind of these arms are mine, they're only, that kind of thing. And like, the Stones do that on "I Got the Blues" and
Sure.
many other songs. So that's kind of a classic. Those are my influences. You know, 70s, 60s, and 70s rock and roll that was influenced by 50s R&B American artists. Like
Can't go
the
wrong.
British invasion guys that stole our black music and then sold it back to us.
That's right.
And
And now you're
it
taking it
doesn't.
back again. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where it came from, though. I mean, some people argue that they were, co-opting. What's the word they use now? Appropriating,
Mm-hmm.
black music. But let's face it, they put some of these artists on the map. even though some bands like Led Zeppelin actually stole the songs and put their names on them as writers, which is not cool.
Yeah.
But you know, the Stones, I mean, you saw they would be on Hullabaloo or whatever with Howlin' Wolf. Brian Jones would be sitting right down there at his feet, you know, staring up at him just in awe. You know, they brought those blues guys to the attention of American kids, you know, who didn't even know they liked the laptop, you know, Beatles and Stones look, young white kids, and they said, well, they're playing this music that's really cool, and well, they know it was coming from Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and, you know, people like that. So, and of course, I was living in America, not in the 50s because I wasn't born yet, but you know, there was a thing in the 70s, there was a time period where every kid in the 70s was listening to 50s music for some reason. I don't know.
Well, American Graffiti, right?
Yeah, the movie American Graffiti came out, and then Happy Days came out,
Yeah.
and there was this like 50s craze, and we all went back, and me and all my friends, you know, I one of the first records I bought was Chuck Berry's Golden Decade, double vinyl LP with all his, you know, from Maybelline through, it was all the Chess record stuff, and you know, I loved that stuff right along with the contemporary, you know, the records that were coming out then. Jay Giles, all the Jay Giles band. I would love Peter Wolf and Jay and
Everybody does
Magic Dick.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
and
Full House is
Stones
the
and
greatest live album ever made, isn't it?
Full House. It certainly is. Thank you. It really is. I know every note of that record, and every band I had in high school. What's that?
You and me both, brother.
Yeah, I mean, I played every band in high school on the set list. First, I look at the purse, Hard Driving Man, Homework.
Mandatory. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, Stones of course, and well, I didn't discover Humble Pie and the Faces and stuff till later, and Free. Well, I did discover Free when I was about 16. That was like the first song I had a band when I was in high school. We were called Trick. Trik.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
No, Trik. And it was just a cover band, and we did Bowie and Kiss and Zeppelin and, you know, the rock and roll of the day. But when did I start telling you this? We did I lost my train of thought.
No worries. Here's what I wanted to say though. I mean, listening again to Guilty, and even just you picking up the guitar for like 30 seconds there, you've got a great voice. You spend so much time playing guitar behind singers, and I think you're primarily known as a guitar player.
Frustrating.
I was going to ask, so it must be great to be able to really, you know, step up to the mic and kind of, you know, show off your vocal chops on some of these songs.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do. You know, I became a singer by default, you know, when I was a kid, because no one could sing. You know, we'd have these bands and nobody wanted to sing. So, and honestly, my mother was a singer. My mother's a jazz singer.
Sure.
And she was singing to me from the, you know, when I was in the womb. So, in fact, once I heard, you know how when your cassette player would get low on batteries, it would play songs, it would play tapes faster.
Yeah.
Because I don't know the physics of it, but
well, if you're recording something slower on dead batteries and then you put in new batteries, it'll go faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it was. Well, I listened to myself singing on something that was it was playing faster, and I thought, oh, this is Mom, right? And I thought I would listen to my mom sing because it was high and it was like jazz, had this jazzy phrasing, and I put new batteries in and it played back down to normal speed, and it was me. I was like, oh shit, you know, it's been in my DNA, you know.
Well, it's great that it's coming out, you know.
Yeah, and you know, so I was always the default singer, but somewhere along the way, I thought, you know, if I want to be in a rock band, I need to have a front man, and you know, I need to play guitar and be behind them. I'll write the songs, you know, with the front man, and then, you know, be, you know, the classic, you know, Mick and Keith, Page and Plant, you know, Tyler and Perry, whatever. And that's when, I had a Company of Wolves with Keith Brewer.
Yeah.
He was the first real guy that I had I had other bands, but that I recorded something with, and we got that was like within a couple of years of moving to New York City, we got a record deal with Mercury and made 2 records with them. But yeah, it's I've always sung and I love singing, and I've played behind some great singers, and
yeah, I wanted to talk about some of those. I mean, I don't want to read your whole resume to you, but again, I don't think a lot of people know how many, that you've worked with everyone like Paul Simon, Billy Squier, Mick DeVille, Peter Wolf. Maceo Parker. It'd probably be easier to list the people you haven't played with over the years. So and you very obviously could have gone along on that career path, kind of going here and there and working with all kinds of people. So why then, when the offer comes along, join the New York Dolls? What attracted you to that opportunity, and why make the sort of career shift there?
Well, at the time, I guess we had Company of Wolves had lost the record deal. Well, this was quite some time before that, but I spent most of all right, in 1990, Company of Wolves came out. We did pretty well on the first album. Second album came out, second album got finished, and the common thing that happens at record companies, new president came in, said, I don't like this music. Who are these guys? They're not platinum, right? Yeah. So if you weren't platinum or at least gold, they cut you off. And also, it was 1992. Nirvana was, the shit right then, and nobody wanted to know about a rock band from New York City. Right. Everybody was flocking to Seattle to sign the next, Cobain or Soundgarden, Mudhoney, whoever was big up there, Stone Temple Pilots. And so they didn't want to know about a rock band from New York. So we tried to get re-signed. Didn't happen. So I said, fuck it. Me and my brother want to do our own thing. We started Crown Jewels, where I could sing and do more of the soulful sort of stuff, like the Humble Pie, Free, Faces sort of sound that we loved. And we spent most of the 90s, playing around and putting out our own records. And, I guess it takes a toll on you when you're like beating your head against the wall. And Billy Squier called me, and Billy had heard the second Company of Wolves album and called up the producer, who he was talking about working on his new record with at the time. This guy Gary Lyons, who would have worked with us, English guy. He had done Zeppelin 4. He had worked on Zeppelin 4, Queen, Night at the Opera, Foreigner, just a great English engineer. And Billy said, who are these guys? I want to know. I want these Steve and Keith to sing on my record. I want Steve to play guitar. And so I did on Billy's Tell the Truth album. That was 1993. And we got tight. He promoted my band. He used to go on the road to do his acoustic tours, and he'd bring a copy of my record, Linoleum, Crown Jewels, and he'd give it to every radio station. He'd go, you got to play these guys, Unfortunately, it was, the radio thing was still very corporate. And so, only guys who had their own like specialty shows on a Saturday night where they could actually play what they wanted to could play it. So, most of the decade went like that. And then when Billy called me in 2001 to go out on his Don't Say No 20th anniversary tour, I was like, oh yeah, I remember the road. We hadn't really gone out on the road since Company of Wolves. We had gone, we'd done little van trips. We'd go to North Carolina, we'd go to DC, we'd go to Boston, Philly. We hadn't been like on a tour bus, cross country. So I did that with Billy. I loved it, had a great time. Realized how much I loved being on the road. So I started taking those kind of gigs again. And of course, I don't have a job. I had been doing studio work, through the people I met in New York in the late 80s, early 90s. I got into this like studio scene where I was playing and singing, mostly singing actually, on commercials and soundtracks and TV shows, and but I wasn't doing a lot of touring. So I did the Billy thing, then I did Mink DeVille, and then Willie DeVille rather, and I was working with Paul Simon also as his vocal stunt double.
Yeah, that to me just is
for rehearsals.
Bizarre. I just don't.
I know, it's crazy.
You. Can you give me a little Paul Simon? Can you?
Let's see. I'm having a blind.
Channel him again.
Yeah. Winter's day in a deep and dark December. Whatever. It was the soft side of my voice, because Mark Stewart is Paul's guitar. He's amazing multi-instrumentalist, plays cello, mandolin, banjo, guitar. He's just an amazing musician. He played cello on the Crown Jewels album my brother and I did called Linoleum. And it was a ballad, a really soft song. And he thought, based on that song, he thought I would be good for Paul. He called me up one day and said, hey, we're doing these rehearsals for Paul's new record, and he doesn't want to sing all the time. So would you like to come and, be his stunt double? I was like, okay, what does it require? Well, you have to learn the entire Paul Simon soundbook, the Paul Simon songbook. So, I'd be set off to the side of the stage there with a music stand, sheet music, lyric books, microphone. And, Paul would be rehearsing the band, amazing band, Steve Gadd on drums, his African bass player, Bagidi and Vincent from the Graceland album, 2 percussionists, 5 horns, 2 keyboard players, Tony Cedrus, accordion, Brazilian guy, just an insane level of musicianship. So it was like going to school, really. I learned so much from that. But I'd be just sitting there thinking, man, I paid these guys to just let me sit here and watch this, But then Paul would go, I'm going to take a break. Bridge Over Troubled Water, Steve. Go ahead, take it. I'd be like, pinch me. What? I've been hearing this song on the radio since I'm 10 years old,
I mean, in that setting,
and Mrs. Robinson, and
are you trying to sing like him, or are you just trying to sing the song the way he would sing it, phrasing wise, or what's
yeah. I mean, I wasn't trying to imitate him, but I knew I wasn't gonna like do my own thing, like I wasn't gonna go like cool you, Mrs. Robinson, I mean,
well, that would have been interesting.
But I sang, respectfully, as close to. Again, not trying to imitate him, but
right.
But he kept me on the gig for 10 years, so I must have done something right. And
Clearly.
People had said Paul is a tough nut to crack. He's like, he's very he's a taskmaster, and it's true. But people would say negative things. I never had a negative experience with him. He was very respectful, and even called me out in front of the band, like, "Man, Steve, that was great," I was like, I'm glad Steve Gadd is here
once, and he was a great guy. So,
Did you interview him once?
Yeah, I've talked to him. Yeah, he was totally nice. And in fact, we got to the end of the interview, and he said, you're my last one of the day. So, let's just keep talking. How much, So he gave me all the time that I wanted, which, often it's you got your 15 minutes, and then they got to go on to the next one. But he was totally gracious. So again, this does not seem like a gig that necessarily leads to
the New York Dolls.
David Johansen. Playing with David Johansen.
Right. Well, I think maybe the Mink DeVille gig, the Willie DeVille gig, might have clinched it for him. But he had asked a bunch of guitar players around town, Jimmy Vivino from the Conan show, the band leader,
right,
and Larry Saltzman, who was playing in his Harry Smith's acoustic blues band.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm putting the Dolls back together for one gig at the Royal Festival Hall. And he says, who should I call? And they both told him, don't call anybody else, call Conte. He's got the right guitars, he's got the right amps, he's got the right look, big nose, big hair, Italian. So I guess he Googled me and probably found out, that I was legit, maybe even saw some videos, I don't know. But we never played a note of music. We went out to lunch. He called me up, told me what was going on. we met, had lunch, and at the end of lunch, he handed me an envelope and said, I took the liberty of making these CDs and sheet musics for you. What do you want to do, this gig or what? I said, yeah, let's go. So, the one gig, next thing I know, I'm in a rehearsal room with Arthur Killer Kane and Sylvain, and it was like freaking dream come true. I mean, you can't think of another gig as a New York guitar player that you can step into like that, where it's a famous band from New York whose lead guitar player is gone. I mean, who else is there that you could have done that with back in 2004? Maybe there's been someone since, I don't know.
I mean, do you feel a kind of sense of, again, they've got a huge legacy, a huge fan base, very passionate fans, and you're stepping into the shoes of a beloved guy. I mean, I would think that's kind of a tightrope walk between, okay, I want to bring my own thing to this, but at the same time, I really have to honor, these songs and the solos and the guy and the playing and all that. How do you navigate that?
Exactly. Well, luckily, I wasn't aware of what rabid fans Johnny Thunders had because I hadn't been a Dolls fan growing up. I was a Stones fan. I figured I could do it because I was into Chuck Berry and Keith Richards.
Yeah.
Those were two of my earliest influences. And to me, Thunders was just Chuck Berry and Keith Richards on steroids. Mm-hmm. So,
and other drugs.
And yes. So I figured, do Chuck Berry, Keith Richards with maximum balls, turn up the amp, and you'll be close to Thunders. But I didn't feel when joining the band like a daunting, oh my God, I'm stepping into the shoes of my hero. I mean, if you would have given me Ronnie Wood's gig in the Stones, I'd be shitting a brick, But I didn't have any fear because I didn't realize. Then, of course, people saw me and they were like, "Oh, he's trying to be Johnny. Look at his nose. Look at his hair." Like,
yeah, you got that nose.
Genetics,
Johnny. Yeah.
This is genetics, folks.
Yeah.
And yes, I honored his solos on the early Doll songs. I played them note for note. Sometimes I had a little flair of my own, but I really didn't do much different, except on Jet Boy, because Jet Boy was like a jam extravaganza. Me and Sylvain would both jam together, and he was not doing anything like what he did on the record, so I didn't do anything like Thunders did, and that was the one tune. But every little short solo, like Private World or trying to think, Bad Girl, the Subway Train, I did play with Thunders played. But then when we started to record the new songs, when we started writing new songs, I was able to do my own, do my own thing. Yeah.
So what was the overall experience like? How did it change things for you in terms of, obviously it increased your recognition with a lot of people got your name out, far and wide, but were there other ways in which it impacted you? Did it have an impact on your playing? Did it have an impact on your writing? Just what did you take away from the whole experience?
Yes, it had. I always wanted to be, a player. Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix. Those were my guys. Ritchie Blackmore. I wanted to be a good player. When I got to a certain level when I was 15, 16, I was figuring out Yes songs by ear, Zeppelin songs in, I didn't know Jimmy Page or Keith Richards use alternate tunings. I'd figure out these songs that were like super easy if you just go like this, but I didn't realize that Keith tuned his guitar like to an open chord, so I'd be like this. I mean, if you're Keith, you just tune this string down and you get rid of this string and you just play straight across. But I didn't know that. And like the Rain song by Zeppelin, I figured all this stuff out in regular tuning, crazy fingering stuff. So I got pretty good. And I feel like, what's next? I got into Jeff Beck, I got into Mahavishnu Orchestra, jazz fusion. And then I where to go from there. West Montgomery, back to my childhood, from one of the first guitar players I ever heard, because my father had all the records of Wes. So that's the kind of guy that I wanted to, the kind of player I wanted to be. And, luckily I had the early experience of Chuck, Keith, even the early Page was just basic blues,
Right.
So, it was already there. But, the years I had studied and practiced, I was probably into a more complicated way of playing, and the Dolls kind of settled me down a little and got me back to basics. I'm thankful for that, because it kind of brought me back to the essence of rock and roll, which is, live and mistakes, and making mistakes work for you. I mean, on the Dolls album, the first Pink album that we did, One Day Will Please Us, everything I recorded, I'm in the right channel, Still's in the left channel. Everything I recorded is one guitar, one take. I played solos live on the basic track, stepped on my pedal for the solo, stepped on it off, back to rhythm. And I love that so much that when I did my album, Steve Conte and the Crazy Truth, I set up the same way. We had Jack Douglas producing that Dolls record. So I watched what Jack did with the mics. He set up my Marshall and my Vox and my Ampeg Reverberacket, 3 amps, and I'd switch between two. I'd either use like the Marshall and Vox, or the Vox and the Ampeg. And I did the same thing for my Crazy Truth record, and I played live rhythm and live solos all one take on that record too. So that was a good lesson for me.
Yeah. So with Sylvain gone, is that sort of the end? I mean, do you anticipate working with Johansson anymore? Or
we shan't work together again now. I was doing a bit of David St. Hubbins for you. Fucking Nigel Tufnell. No, I think, there can't be a Dolls without Sylvain. I mean, he was the heart and soul of the Dolls. Yeah, I mean, I've honestly moved on,
Yeah. Well, again, and you're doing a million things again, and a million, everything with you seems to be a left turn. I mean, again, I don't think a lot of people would necessarily know that you've done a bunch of anime soundtracks and work on that. I mean, how did you sort of, get into that? And has it made you like 15 times cooler with your kids?
Actually, I'm sorry. I'm trying to stuff with this lamp here. I got this lamp is supposed to be good for Zoom, but it doesn't really work too good, does it?
It's a little bright, but you're okay.
I don't really need the lamp at all, do I? Yeah, my 12-year-old is super into anime. But he's into the new stuff. He's into, what is it? Demon Slayer, and what's the other one? My Hero Academia. I know all these, he's constantly talking about them, but I mean, the old school stuff was, Dragon Ball Z, and what's the other stuff? It used to be on Adult Swim, well, Cowboy Bebop, which was the one I did. But he had never heard of Cowboy Bebop until I told him, "Oh, you're into anime?" All of a sudden, well, check this out, man. And I played him Cowboy Bebop, and he's like, "Wow, it's you singing on it." Yeah, so if you Google me, like probably the first 100 things you see are like Steve Conte, Words We Couldn't Say, Steve Conte, Rain, all these songs from anime soundtracks. They're like the most popular, and they have crazy fans that, not literally crazy, but they're rabid fans. And they just love this stuff. And, when I got the call to do it, it was another one of those, you hang around this crazy town long enough, your name gets passed around, and you never know, if you got a good reputation for delivering when you walk into the studio, you get called again. So when Yoko Kanno called me and said, I'm doing a session, I want to hire you. I came in, I sang it, she loved it. She said, I'm doing another session next month for a new anime that's coming out called Cowboy Bebop. But never heard anything about it. Nobody had heard about it at that time. I did it, and 25 years later, it's an absolute classic. It's the thing that most anime soundtracks are judged by now. Because you know what we did? I know I'm getting off the subject of my music, but this is kind of important,
Sure.
I think. They there was no animation done when the Cowboy Bebop soundtracks were being recorded. She had been Yoko Kanno, the composer, had been given the story and said, in this scene that we want the song for, this character, you know, lost their lover or somebody died or it's got to be sad and whatever. And so she wrote the music. She had an American lyricist write the lyrics. I sang it. And then they played the song for the animators and they listened to the music, my voice, the emotion in my voice, the emotion in the music. And that's how the cartoon was drawn.
Wow. I hope you got a little of that back end money for that.
Buyout.
Well, you know, all these different pots you have on the stove. I mean, has that now become sort of the way? Have you learned to appreciate that maybe more so than you did when you know you were younger?
Oh hell yeah!
The ability to sort of to have all these different experiences and learn from all these different people and sort of, you know, take in all this stuff because I think nobody really gets into music to necessarily, you know, be a sideman or a hired player or a session guy. You know, you want to, as I think you talked about, you know, you want to front your band, you want to play arenas, you want to be a rock star. And then you sort of go off on this different path and you've worked with all these different people and had all these different, you know, things to learn from. And I would think after you've done it for as long as you have, you can kind of learn to appreciate, you know, the benefits you've had from going that route.
Well, I think some people do have the goal of, you know, I moved to New York to be a session musician. I mean, I was like, I was half and half. When I first moved to New York, it was to start a band and get signed and get a record out, which I did pretty quickly, actually. But then I accidentally fell into the studio thing and, you know, made the most money I ever made in my life doing studio work. You know, more than record sales, more than touring, more than anything. And then, you know, you have a little window and then that goes away. And then you're like, okay, now what? Oh, back to touring, you know? But, you know, there are some guys who still, that's all they do. They don't write, they don't sing.
Yeah.
They're just excellent players or excellent readers. I'm not a great reader. I was never, you know, I mean, if someone puts a piece of music in front of me, you know, how do you get a guitar player to turn down? Put a piece of music in front of them. So, you know, if someone puts a sheet of music in front of me, I can read it if you give me like, okay, I need at least 15 minutes with this. And then I have to like write my own little cheat sheets and, you know, underline things. But yeah, I somehow fell into both. But, you know, I always knew, you know, I always wrote songs and sang. And, you know, I wanted to be a jazz player at one point. I went to school and studied, you know, with Wes Montgomery's protege, Ted Dunbar. But, you know, I got out of school and I realized the competition is so fierce and there's so many phenomenal players that only play jazz from the minute they wake up till the minute they go to bed. They practice 8 hours a day, like Pat Metheny, who blows my mind. I love him. But, you know, I tried practicing 8 hours a day like Pat Metheny. I fell asleep in front of the music stand. I couldn't take it. You know, I just couldn't do it. And there was always, you know, a singer in me and a songwriter that, you know, I knew I had to get back to that. So, yeah, there's. So but I'm glad I got the education and I'm glad I got the knowledge. But what I was going to say is, it's always been about multiple streams of income as a musician.
Reality.
In New York or maybe anywhere, but you know, I'm not one of these guys, and I know lots of guys who don't do what I do, who just play in a band. And boy, that band better be famous and better, you know, make you a lot of money. Yeah. And there are friends of mine like Dragon from the Backyard Babies. I mean, the guy he's an animal, you know, he's like a great rock guitar player. That's what he does. Boom. You know, he's not a session guy. He's, you know, but he's famous in his, you know, his pockets of, you know, Sweden, where he's from, Japan, England, probably more places around the world than I know of. But, you know, he's taken his fame with that, and then, you know, he'll get endorsements, Dragon beer and Dragon cars and Dragon candy. You know, you got to do stuff like that if you're, you know, if you're that kind of just musician that does one thing. And he does it really well. So don't get me wrong, I'm not putting it down. It's sometimes I wish I just did one thing well. It would be so much easier. But you know, I love soul music, I love jazz, I love folk, I love country, I love rock and roll, I love punk, I love not heavy metal, but you know, hard rock. So you know, I like a lot of different kinds and play a lot of different kinds of music, which helps me work really.
So aside from this album, do you have some other stuff? Do you have 15 different pots on the stove still?
The one really different thing that I'm doing now is I'm playing with rockabilly legend Robert Gordon.
No way.
Yeah, I've been playing gigs with him for a couple of years now. Chris Spedding, who plays on my new record, he recommended me for Robert years ago. We met in New York, and I used to go hang out at Chris's house on Saturday afternoons and sort of study with him, I guess. But you know, basically we just sit there all day, smoke cigarettes, drink coffee, watch videos of Tal Farlow and you know, Thelonious Monk, and we jam on his tunes, my tunes. And he recommended me to Robert, and at the time I didn't do it because I was convinced that my band, the Crown Jewels, was going to get signed, and you know, this was like early '90s, and so Robert offered me the gig. Then I turned it down, and here I am, whatever, 20 years later. He called me again, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll do that."
30 years later.
Oh, okay, whatever. Yeah, 30 years. God. Well, that's so great. Yeah, because rockabilly to me, it like combines the best of the stuff that I love. It combines rhythm and blues, jazz, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
So, you know, a jazz lick would sound out of place in a, you know, punk song, but in a rockabilly song that's almost as raw as a punk song.
Yep.
You know, like a Stray Cats thing. I mean, you listen to Brian Setzer, man. He's, you know, he's got some jazz chops, but it still sounds raw and cool. And you know, when they came out, they were considered, I guess, sort of part of the new wave scene. You know, because they were young and they had cool hair and cool clothes, and you know, but they were playing, you know, at the time in the '80s with 30-year-old music. You know.
Oh yeah, well yeah, all the Johnny Burnett,
Johnny Burnett, Gene Vincent, yeah, Cliff Gallup, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm enjoying playing with Robert, and I'm of course still playing with Michael Monroe and my own thing. That's really it right now. That's all I'm doing. And I'm producing a few artists who want me to lend a hand to their songs.
Okay. Is there anybody left on your bucket list that you haven't played with that would be like kind of the dream?
Yeah. I don't know if I would say I would want a long-term gig with them, but I'd like the opportunity to at least jam once with Paul McCartney, Rod Stewart, Keith, but like, you know, Paul Westerberg, you know, Chrissie Hynde. I want to be in the Pretenders, man.
Who doesn't?
I always wanted to be in the Pretenders. I love James Honeyman Scott.
Yeah.
He's like the perfect guitar player. I mean, for that band, certainly. But at the time, he was somewhere right in between Steve Jones and Jimmy Page.
Yep.
So he was like, you know, played the Les Paul. He had, you know, chunky, beefy, bluesy lead tone, but he understood punk. And he had sort of the Andy Summers kind of chorusy tone as well on like stuff like Talk of the Town and stuff like that, you know, the more jangly stuff. Kid is one of the greatest guitar solos ever.
Well, I mean, that whole first album is, you know, every song is a classic.
Yeah.
You know, and he's a huge part of that. I mean, because he takes her songs that are essentially, you know, 2-3 bar chords and a couple of weird time signatures in there, and he just makes the most of them, you know, takes them to new places.
Yeah, I mean, that's, to me, that would be a great gig, you know, because she's writing the songs, she's the rhythm player, and then it's all freedom of the other guy to like, which is what I do when I play with like I played with Willie Nile.
Yep.
I don't know if you know him, but he's kind of
Totally.
a
Yep.
folky but punk, you know.
Still making great albums.
Yeah, New York guy. I've toured with Willie. I've played gigs with him. You know, because he strums, and then it's up to me to play the, you know, the ballsy, maybe more complex shit. And since I'm not singing, I can do that. Now, when I do my own gigs, you know, I'm doing a lot of letting a chord ring and, you know, singing my ass off and then going back to chords, you know. I could have another guitar player, and I have tried that, but I just prefer a trio. It's so much freedom. So yeah, I'm working on
power trio.
yeah, I've always had power trios, and I would probably opt for. I'm looking to do a record release party this fall for Bronx Cheer, and I'll probably have a keyboard player, not another guitar player with me.
Yeah, it makes sense. And for some of these songs, especially, it's
yeah.
that part of the sonic spectrum that you need filling in for sure. All right, listen, man. I think that's everything I had. Did we talk about everything that you wanted to get to?
We haven't talked much about Monroe, but
Did you want to? We can.
um, sure. You know, my role in that band, you know, that the Monroe thing came out of the Dolls. Sammy and I were, you know, the Dolls gigs had been dwindling down, and Sammy had started playing with his old buddy from Hanoi Rocks, Michael, and he called me up and said, "Hey, we need a guitar player. You want to come and fill in on a couple of gigs?" And I said, "Well, sure. I need work. You know, I had just had my first son, and you know, I don't have a job." So I said, "I don't think I can be in the band because I'm in the Dolls, you know." But I went and did the gig, and they offered me the gig, and I said, we toured the West Coast and played South by Southwest, and they asked me if I wanted to be in the band. I said, "Well, I'll do both, you know, as long as I can." And as it turned out, both Michael and the New York Dolls were booked to do their first album starting on the same day. Michael was booked already in LA on September 10th, 2010. And then the Dolls manager called up and said, "Okay, guys, we're ready to do the next album. It's September 10th in England." I'm like, I can't be there, you know? And so then one thing just gave way to the other. And we did that first album, Century Overdrive, with Ginger. Ginger left a year later, and then he had written a lot of the songs for that album. And then Ginger left, and the guys were like, "Oh shit, who are we gonna get to write songs?" And I was like, "Hello."
Yeah, I got my box full of songs.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't think those guys ever really like listened to any of my albums. They didn't really pay attention, you know. So I basically wrote, I won't say every song, but I brought in a lot of songs that were 100% written already. A few that were riffs that Dragon came up with, a few that were riffs that Sammy came up with, that, you know, were just pieces of music, not even full pieces of music. And we kind of, the thing I like about Horns and Halos, that album, is that we really jammed a lot as a band. And so it's more organic sounding, I think, than any of the other records, because we really came to those songs from jamming on them. We sort of did that on the next album, which I'll get to in a minute. But this one was really, we spent a lot of time, because I was living in Europe, and it was just a stone's throw away, you know, just jump on a plane from Amsterdam, and I'm in Helsinki in a couple hours. And yeah, a lot of those songs were, that was kind of like my album, right? Of the Michael albums. The first one was Ginger's. Then the next one, Blackout States, was kind of a combination of me and Rich Jones, who was writing a lot of really good stuff too. When he came in, we jammed a bit on that and co-wrote some stuff. And then the next one, One Man Gang, was really Rich just kind of took off with his writing and wrote a ton of great stuff for that record. I think I co-wrote 4 songs with him, but we recorded like 18 songs. He had some great ones. And Michael actually covered my song Junk Planet from the Steve Conte and Crazy Truth album, which was a single. And then, unfortunately, the pandemic hit and One Man Gang just sort of, we got about 4 months of touring out of it and then didn't get a chance. It's a great album. So I'm really sorry that one didn't get to see more daylight, but we're working on a new one.
Touring on for this album, do you think?
For which?
Your album.
For my album, Bronx Cheer? Yeah. I certainly hope so, but who knows what COVID has in store for us. And, I don't necessarily have a band in place. I'm going to do for this record release party, if it happens, trying to get the same band that played on the record, my brother and Charlie Drayton.
Yeah.
I mean, Charlie is just did we talk about Charlie?
Do you have to talk about Charlie? He's what is there to say about Charlie, man?
Well, for the people that don't know about Charlie Drayton, I mean, he is one of my favorite drummers in the world, not just in New York. I mean, he plays with such groove and such quirkiness. Like I knew when I made this record, I want to make a straight ahead rock and roll record, but I don't want the drumming to be normal.
Right.
Of course I want it to groove hard, but I want there to be some quirks and some like weirdness. And you never have to say, Charlie, can you make it weird? he just does stuff that no one else would do. Like he'll do a crazy fill and not hit a cymbal crash after. It's like little stuff like that makes it like, yes. But I mean, you can hear him. I mean, he's the drummer on, for you people out there that don't know, Take It So Hard, Keith Richards and the Expensive Winos. That's Charlie on drums. B-52's Love Shack. That's Charlie. I Touch Myself, the Divinyls, the whole record. It's Charlie. I mean, a million records. Just Google him. But so it's Charlie on drums, my brother on bass, and I'm hoping that they're going to be my band. That I've already talked to them. It's really not up to me. It's up to the pandemic, whether and the clubs and the laws of New York State and city, if we can gather in late October, which is when it's going to be. So,
do you have a friendly rivalry with your brother as musicians? Is it always a kind of a one-up thing, or are you a little more cooperative than that?
No, in fact, well, I don't know. Maybe you should talk to him.
Well, maybe I would.
but we grew up playing together. We recorded our first album in the family living room. We were 9, 10 years old. Original songs, some of my earliest, definitely my earliest songs. And he was writing too. But then at a certain point, he got more into the playing side, and I got more into the writing side. And now it's to the point where he's just starting to make his first solo record. 35 years after Company of Wolves.
You're going to be on it, or are you going to tell him no, you're busy?
I am on it. I have one co-write with him, and that I play guitar on and sang on too. But he does a very different thing than me. I'm more of a loud, bashy rock and roll guy, but I can also play a tender ballad and sing it.
The Paul Simon song.
Yeah, but he's more on that side. He's more like folk, weird, alternative, acoustic. He's really talented. But I knew I wanted to have him play bass on this record because he also has no ego about playing my bass parts from my demos. You might get some other guy who's like, yeah, well, that's what you play, but here, take this, man. My brother's like, no, that works for the song. I'm going to play exactly what you played. And so that's why I knew, I had to have him on this record, because him and Charlie together would get what I was after.
Well, it worked, man. Good call.